This is Arkin.
Hey.
He may not look like much, but he's done far more for the world than you probably thought. And it all started with a little film called... Released in 2009, The Collector came out just at the end of the torture porn craze of the early 2000s and has continued to grow in popularity in the years since its release. It may not be the most intelligent film, fully committing to even the most basic levels of its genre, but don't let that fool you. Despite its issues, it still has something deeper than its Rotten Tomatoes score would suggest. Arkin. Over the course of the film, this guy ends up becoming one of the most likable characters I've ever seen in a horror movie, especially one as dreadful as The Collector, and it's largely due to his impossible patience and selflessness. The film goes so far out of its way to present Arkin with problems, even more than you'd probably expect for a main character in a horror movie. Seemingly everything he does revolves around someone else, whether it be his daughter, or his girlfriend, or his employer, or his employer's daughter. The entire conflict of the film, him being stuck in a house filled with booby traps and a sadistic serial killer, only arises from his desire to help his family. Though we learn that he is a criminal, a highly experienced thief who has been planning to steal from his employer, the film never emphasizes Arkin's criminality. Instead, it suggests that he does and likely began this for similar reasons that he does most things in the film: other people, rather than his own selfishness. Maybe he had just gone through a run of bad luck and felt compelled to turn to robbery to help those closest to him. Essentially, even the most typically unlikable aspect of his character, stealing from his employer, if you think that that's unlikable, is presented in relation to his good traits, as a consequence of being selfless. After sneaking into the house and discovering the darkness hidden within, the family being brutally tortured, he doesn't simply abandon them or try to find a way out himself. Well, at least not after he fails to do that very thing. Now, he's not dumb either. Plenty of times throughout the film, Arkin finds himself in positions where he can act to save someone but chooses not to, instead deciding to maintain his cover. These moments, though, almost always come after he's tried to help, just unsuccessfully. Time and time again, Arkin puts himself into vulnerable positions to help the other victims, but they often end up doing things that make it harder on themselves and Arkin. These reckless actions may be due to their desperation and trauma, but Arkin still has to endure their consequences, which makes him all the more selfless when he continues to help them even after they have repeatedly hindered him. He does get pretty mad about it though.
Listen to me. I told you to stay with me.
He does want to escape though, to survive. He has his own obligations, his own daughter and girlfriend, but still feels pressure to help the other victims, even though he had planned to rob them. There's this pull in his character, this conscience that the filmmakers choose to emphasize that I find interesting, especially with how it stands out in such a dark and violent film. Scene after scene, even after witnessing and living through the torture of this masked killer, Arkin considers other people. Through all of the pain and horror he experiences, we never really see much of his own desires separate from those around him. Arkin's entire character revolves around others, trying to keep them alive. But that's what makes him so much more interesting a character than I'd have expected from a film like The Collector. Though I think it's often a missed opportunity, most horror films don't present characters with such clear divisions of selflessness and self-preservation. It's just about surviving, not addressing about how one person's survival is often tied to another's. Characters don't typically have to risk their own lives to save someone else, at least not with the film so heavily emphasizing their awareness of that decision. That the character wants to live and knows they'll likely die, but still decides to risk it all because they can't simply abandon the other person. Arkin is the heart of the film, not because he's the main character, but because his conscience carries it. His motivations give the Collector much needed emotional weight, and helps make him the one interesting character in a sea of otherwise ordinary ones. He's not the most complex or captivating character cinema has to offer, but I think he still deserves a spotlight, even if only for a few minutes. Thanks for watching.